Joining me now is constitutional attorney and historian Joe Wolverton with the New American and the John Birch Society. Joe, welcome back to the broadcast. By the way, how is your mother doing?
Well, Brennan, thank you for asking. Not well, sir, but she's in the care of Jesus, and he'll make up the difference for what I'm not able to do as her son. And but she's still with us on this side, and I'll be going over and having dinner with her here when I'm finished with you. But thank you for asking.
You bet. We'll ask our audience to pray for Joe's mom. Joe, we're coming up here now. Give me liberty, or actually it happened. Give me liberty or give me death. 250 years later, I guess the anniversary of this speech, was this yesterday, March 23rd? Is that right?
That's right. Yep.
And I think most of us in school, I don't know about the kids today, if they learned about give me liberty or give me death, Patrick Henry, but most of us in school did, our age. Tell me about this speech, and of course, because I think a lot of people will be shocked if they don't remember that he went on to become the governor of Virginia.
Yeah, Patrick Henry, he was an amazing individual. He was one of these guys that his first biographer was a guy named William Wirt, and William Wirt wrote about Patrick Henry. He said he could talk. Gods could he talk, because Patrick Henry was so well educated. And this is something that I wrote a biography of him, I don't know, probably a dozen years ago for the New American. And something that people always associate with Patrick Henry as being sort of the less educated side of the founding fathers, which isn't true. His library was impressive. His ability to memorize was impressive. And he would stand up and, for example, in the Virginia ratification convention for the Constitution, he stood there for 4 hours without notes and schooled James Madison on history. And James Madison got up and did the same thing. It was beautiful to watch. If you'd have been there, I'm sure. But he earned his reputation very early. A young man, not even 30 years old. He argued against an established religion in the state, that you shouldn't be forced. You shouldn't put Baptist preachers in jail because they weren't associated and weren't paying the Anglican Church, the Church of England, which was established in Virginia. So he went around and he made his reputation that way, became a delegate to the House of Delegates very young. He was from sort of the backwoods, which maybe contributed to the idea that he wasn't as well educated, but he was incredible. And he was also one of those men that could not be compromised. He was, there was no amount of money that could have been spent to shut his mouth and to keep him from proclaiming peace, proclaiming the gospel, and proclaiming the right of men to be free from tyranny. And of course, he had a speech before this one, right? If this be treason, make the most of it, which, was really kind of the speech that set him, just propelled him into national prominence. It was one of those things where King George was one after the other of these edicts, and Patrick Henry proceeds to talk about history, and he names, Caesar had his Brutus, Charles I had his Cromwell, and George III has his, and of course he was going to say Patrick Henry, but the crowd rose up and started shouting treason, treason, treason. And Patrick Henry just calmly stood there and said, well, if this be treason, make the most of it. In other words, come and get some, and just that whole steely spine is what we've lost, Brandon. All you have to do, you go in, and I've written about the anniversary of this many times, and they're putting a new article up on the New American today that I wrote because I wanted to be a bit more strident in telling that story, because it's almost a museum piece. It's almost some sort of just ceremonial thing that we remember that he did it, but it's more important to remember why, and to remember that, he was one of these men, like Mercy Otis Warren said, that they knew that it was as important to die well as it was to live well. And what was he, his idea was, what am I going to do? Live a life where I live an old life and I die of some fever at 70, or I can die defending liberty at 40? Well, there's no question which I choose. But today, of course, we don't have that same sort of attitude. about liberty and about its defense. And particularly, we don't have the same attitude about dying well.
Right.
We are not only to live well, but we are to die well.
Well, wasn't he just 39 when he gave that speech, Give Me Liberty? 39.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean,
tell me about that
39.
day. I mean, the colonies are worried about King George encroaching on them. And so a bunch of them meet there where were they meeting? Tell me where they
Well, he was now this
in Richmond, Virginia, right? Episcopal Church?
Right. At the St. John's Church, which I went and visited last summer. I went and did what you might call it a pilgrimage to St. John's Church. We have still everything is still inside there. You can see where the different pews, where the founding fathers you could reserve pews by donating to the church. And so you see the different names of our founding fathers where they had, it's really a surreal feeling to walk in.
Will they let you actually walk into the building, in the room?
Absolutely.
Is it a room that's used, or is it just a museum now?
No, you can actually use it. You can call in advance and you have to pay for it, but you can reserve that and you can have a special tour and sit there where George Washington sat, stand there where Patrick Henry stood, and it's beautiful. St. John's Church there in Richmond, and in the cemetery alone, you have George Wythe cemetery. Just it's an amazing place. But anyway, on that day, 1775, you got to realize this is March. And, you got the shot heard around the world in April. And so we're talking weeks before the shot heard around the world. And Patrick Henry, the problem he was having at the Virginia convention there, the second convention, they were trying to decide, what are we going to do? What's our response? And most of the people, as you might imagine, most of the men there at that convention, their opinion was, well, let's just wait and see what happens. Let's not accelerate things. And Patrick Henry would point to Boston and all of the tyranny there and all of the atrocities committed by the British there. And you had men in Virginia saying, well, that's Massachusetts. That's not Virginia. I'm not going to put my life on the line for the sake of people from Massachusetts. If they do something in Virginia, we'll do it. But let's see if they will declare a peace with us. And he said, how can they declare peace when there are warships in the harbor? There are men in Boston dead today because we've been invaded by this foreign foe. And so you had many people in Virginia, even at that late hour in March of 1775, really hoping that they could reach some sort of compromise with the king that would prevent them from going to war. And Patrick Henry, his position was, I'm tired of begging for peace. He knows we want peace. We've tried peace. And his famous line, I'll read it here from the address. He says, there is no retreat but in submission and slavery. He's like, there's no peace now. He sent warships. He sent soldiers. He's killed people. He's declared that anyone who speaks in favor of the colonists sharing the same freedom as British natives, he said the king has declared that person an enemy of the state and to be hanged by the neck until dead. And it's like, there's no such thing anymore as peace. We either submit and be slaves, or we move forward and we, leave our fate in the hands of the Almighty. And he said, that's when he quotes, of course, from the scripture and says, I don't know what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death.
I want to play a little bit of the reenactment of his speech. And then I want to ask you then about I want to ask you about the 14th Amendment. Watch a little bit of this, folks. The 250th anniversary of the giving of this speech was yesterday, March 23rd, 1775.
Let me say one thing. The one you're about to show is the best of all of them, by the way.
Look at that. Look at that. Here we go. Is that in the actual building?
That is in the actual building, and it is brilliant.
Here we go.
Gentlemen, there is no longer any ground for hope. If we wish to be free, if we wish to preserve inviolate those inestimable privileges which belong to us as free men. Aye. If we mean not basely to abandon the noble struggle in which we have been so long engaged, in which we have pledged ourselves never to abandon until the glorious object of our struggle be obtained, then we must fight. I repeat it, sir. We must fight. To arms and to the God of hosts is all we have left us.
Arms, Mr. Henry. What arms? We're weak, sir.
They tell us, sir, that we are weak, unable to cope with so powerful an adversary. But when shall we be stronger? Will it be the next week? Or the next year? Will it be when we are totally disarmed and a British Guard shall be stationed in every house? Shall we acquire the means of effectual resistance by lying supinely on our backs, hugging the delusive phantom of hope until our enemy hath bound us hand and foot? Sir, we are not weak if we make a proper use of those means the God of nature hath placed in our power. 3 millions of people, armed in the holy cause of liberty, and in such a country that which we possess, are invincible by any force our enemy can send against us. Besides, sir, we shall not fight our battles alone. There is a just God who presides over the destinies of nations, who will raise up friends to fight our battles for us. The battle, sir, is not to the strong alone. It is to the vigilant, the active, the brave. Besides, sirs, we have no election. Should we be base enough to desire it, it is now already too late to retire from the contest. There is no retreat, but in submission and slavery. Our chains are forged, their clanking may be heard upon the plains of Boston. The war is inevitable, and let it come. I repeat it, sir, let it come!
Mr. Henry, we speak for peace, sir.
It is in vain to extenuate the matter. Gentlemen may cry, peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war is actually begun. The next gale that blows from the north shall bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms. Our brethren are already in the field. Why stand we here idle? What is it that they wish? What would they have? Is life so dear? Or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God! I know not what course others may take. But as for me, give me liberty or give me death!
Well said. Two arms, Mr. Henry.
Joe?
Yes, sir.
Who was there listening to that? George Washington? Who else?
Well, we don't know exactly who all was listening, who all could have been there. But yeah, if you go there, they do have a list of the people that could have been there. It's one of those things, at that time, the transportation wasn't as easy as it is today. So we're not entirely sure who was there. We know who should or could have been there, but the regardless, instantly, this speech was once again written down, and they rode to Boston and published in every newspaper from Boston to Savannah.
Did he give it? Did he give it off the cuff, or was that a written speech?
It was off the cuff. He claims that he was moved by these people constantly pushing, timidly, as he would call it, timidly waiting for peace, when he says those days are long gone. And there is no peace with people that are sending troops to your shores. You cannot make peace with those people. It's a thing I wrote in the article. I'll just read it to you because it'll make it easier than trying to just, I'm not Patrick Henry. He says, I wrote this yesterday. What would Patrick Henry do today? Would he accept federal dictates that desecrate the 10th Amendment? Would he comply with gun control, mask mandates, or surveillance schemes? Would he tiptoe around the Constitution to keep his job or his reputation? Or would he rise from his seat and thunder again? The answer is self-evident, and the question now is not what Patrick Henry would do, but what will we do? We need men and women in every state house, every county commission, every sheriff's office, every school board, and every pulpit to rise with that same indomitable spirit. We need Americans to remember that liberty is granted only by God, and it is not preserved by permission, but by defiance.
Wow.
That is the American way. Patrick Henry didn't ask permission to oppose tyranny. He stood, he spoke, and he risked everything to keep his chains off and his conscience clear.
Let me go to an article. I don't know if you're familiar with the gentleman that wrote this article. It is Lawrence W. Reed.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay. He says here, again, I don't know if it's true or not, Thomas Jefferson and George Washington were present and stirred by Henry's words. So
Yeah,
was
they should have been. They could have been present. Yeah.
Okay. So was Edward Carrington, who later served with distinction as a lieutenant colonel in Washington's Continental Army. Carrington listened to Henry's speech from outside one of the church windows.
Yep.
He was so moved by it that he turned to his friends and said, "Boys, bury me here in this very spot." When he died 34 years later, he was indeed buried under that window.
Yeah. I mean, that's the kind of, but again, Brandon, we all can be Patrick Henry. We do have that capacity. This notion of carrying around, a pocket constitution as that being some sort of talisman of bravery, but remaining silent in the face of tyranny, that gets us nothing. As the good book says, the demons believe and tremble as
Right.
well. We need to do something more than just believe in liberty or shake our fist at the tyrants. We need to remember that.
Well, I think I'm going to tell you something
have to die well.
some folks may be doing. I just got a story here I want to share with you. The article concluded that the convention rallied to Henry's cause and moved to place Virginia in a posture of defense. Washington, Jefferson, and a handful of others were appointed to prepare a plan to create an army. Lord Dunmore, the British-appointed governor of Virginia, would soon abandon the colony and flee on a ship. Patrick Henry became the first governor of the new state of Virginia. In the same month, the Declaration of Independence was signed, July of 1976. So, Joe, when and how did he die?
Patrick Henry died in 1799. So many other events in his life, Brandon, that deserve speaking. I mean, he was one of the things that most impressed me about Patrick Henry is he was selected to go to the Constitutional Convention of 1787, but he famously said that he wouldn't go because he smelled a rat.
Right.
He wrote that he indicated there will be people at that convention who will want to throw out our Constitution and return to a monarchy, and so he famously demurred. And others said the thing I know about his death. I did a special about him several years ago, and let's see, I'm trying to remember. I think he just died of old age, actually. Yeah, he just died of old age. But he did something really cool at his deathbed. He took a little book, which you can still see at his home. You can go visit his home in Virginia. And he took a little book and wrote his testimony of the Savior. And that was sort of his last, sort of his last words, if you will. His last mortal act, was to write out his testimony of the Savior. Yeah, he just died of an illness, the sort of thing
Right.
who would die at his age. But he had lived, I mean, all of the things we're talking, the Parsons Cause that set him on the path of religious liberty, if this be treason, he said that if this be treason at 29, and he goes on to be young, so young and representing his district there in the House of Delegates, and then with the give me liberty or give me death, and he just placed himself at the forefront of those who would not capitulate or compromise with tyranny. And that's the example to us. We can all read that, and we just heard the man recite it. That's a really good adaptation, reenactment of the speech. But we all can emulate him. This is the thing, too. I don't think Patrick Henry would at all be moved by people respecting him or knowing that the date on which he gave a speech. The thing that I think would move Patrick Henry and would impress Patrick Henry is if we emulated Patrick Henry, right? If we all decided that when it comes to this, we need to stand together, shoulder to shoulder, steeled by his spirit, and speak those because it is time, Brennan, and you know it as well as I do, that the hour is already late, and those who cry peace with the enemy, that day has passed. That ship has sailed.
Well, let me see if this is what's maybe beginning here, because I predicted this, and regulars on this show will know that when USAID and all the corruption was revealed, billions, trillions being wasted. What we pay in federal income tax as a whole, almost all of it is completely wasted and given away to terrorist groups, DC insiders, NGOs, corrupt countries, condoms for Gaza. And I said, you know what? And I participated several times. And I said, look, I'm not telling people to do this. I'm just telling you, something tells me a bunch of the people in the public are going to say, I'm done working this hard, sacrificing, doing without, not getting things that my kids need in order for this money to be shipped overseas or go to corrupt fat cats and judges and their wives or children and NGOs. I said, my natural thoughts are that when Americans hear this day in and day out through Doge, they're going to say, I'm done, I'm out. And I didn't say that I was for that. I'm not encouraging anyone to not pay their taxes. I would not encourage you to do that. That could backfire on you. But I thought that is a natural reaction when people find out their government's so corrupt. They're going to say, I'm done paying taxes. Well, we have Simon Ateba. I guess he's a chief White House correspondent and founder of the Daily Letter. He is reporting today, this is out today, March 24th, IRS is bracing for a potential $500 billion drop in revenue as more Americans consider skipping their tax filings following layoffs tied to the Department of Government Efficiency under President Trump, the Washington Post claims. The report says online chatter reveals growing taxpayer resistance, with many betting they won't be audited as Doge plans to cut 20% of the IRS staff by May 15th. Agency has already halted investigations into wealthy individuals and corporations, and new hires and enforcement have been targeted. Treasury officials warn this shift could slash 2025 tax revenues by 10%, impacting federal revenue nearly as much as the entire U.S. military budget. Again, how much longer do you think Americans are going to tolerate this before we have a Boston Tea Party, or is it already underway in your mind?
I think we're having a sort of technological Boston Tea Party. I see it every day on X. I helped get the John Birch Society's X account off the ground. We doubled our followers in a week, and we're now monetized on X, which is remarkable.
Yeah.
But I see it every day. I see these young men send me direct messages and just retweet our stuff. And I think we're having a technological Boston Tea Party. I think we're having this is sort of one of those things where it truly is this group of people that maybe don't attract the attention of the tyrants and those for whom the tyrants work, but they're getting to that point where they're saying, look, history shows us the path in front of us. You know, we can be timid and mild and obedient and compliant, and we know where that will lead. Or we can do as our fathers did and say, give me liberty or give me death, and not mean it as some sort of little quaint little historical quotation, but not as a metaphor, but as a mandate. Give me liberty or give me death.
Tell me what you make. Let's move quickly here. A couple more points. The judges blocking President Trump. Are we already in a constitutional crisis?
Already, yes, sir. And it has to be settled. It has to be settled. There has to be finally someone, and I think, you know, we saw President Trump ignore the one dictate. We cannot have a black-robed oligarchy running this country. We cannot have 330 million people. And in this case, even if you only count the people that voted for Trump, we can't have 80 million people. We can't have their will stymied by one judge. That's not the definition of Republican government. That's the definition of authoritarianism. We can't let that happen. The founding fathers never intended for the federal judiciary, which was created in the Constitution, to somehow be above the Constitution. The very notion is ridiculous to anyone who has studied the history of the Constitution. It was not meant to do that. The president is the head of the executive branch. The things he is closing are under the executive branch, and he has the constitutional obligation to carry out the laws. This he is doing. This is the perfect example of the correct constitutional use of an executive order. For example, shutting down, if I know he didn't, but you know what I'm talking about, the Department of Education. If he had completely abolished it, that is a rightful use of an executive order. That is an executive agency. Congress may have funded it, but they didn't create it. The president created it as an executive branch agency, and he has every right to shut it down. These judges standing in the way need to be completely
How is the
ignored.
Supreme Court going to respond to this? Is this going to the Supreme Court?
Who cares? Does the Supreme Court have an army they're going to send out?
Right.
They're going to send John Roberts up to enforce it? No, forget it.
Wasn't it Andrew Jackson who didn't he thumb his nose at the Supreme Court? You've made your decision, now enforce it. Was he the one that said that?
Yeah. Well, they attribute that. He really didn't say that, but they attribute that to him. But yes, you made your decision, now enforce it. And we need that spirit. Fine. You think it's bad. The American people think it's right. Vox populi, vox Dei. The voice of the people is the voice of God when it comes to government. We say it's good. I don't care what 5 black-robed 80-year-olds have to say about it. It mattereth not to me. The president agrees. The people elected him. The people elected those people that are in the Congress. We elected him expecting him to choose people who would shut down the unnecessary departments of government. This is what we voted for.
So let me ask you this. Is Congress going to put some of this into law? Because I have some of our listening audience communicating, sitting in email, some of them have my text, they have my wife's text, and they're saying, is President Trump, is everything he's done by executive order just going to be overturned with the next president if a Democrat gets in there? I mean, is Congress going to put any of these things into law so these executive orders are more than something can be turned over? Or is Congress too much under the control of blackmail by FBI or CIA?
Well, blackmail by FBI, by CIA, by BlackRock, by lots of people with lots of money that we can't even imagine. And I wish they would, but we see it, Brandon. I mean, we have to be honest with each other. There wouldn't be this continuing resolution if the Republicans had any kind of backbone the way we want them to. We've got to see, if you're a Republican, that means you believe in small government. You don't believe in bloating the government and kicking the can down the road another time. We believe in standing up. And, the way the president has done on other things, let's do it on this. Let's go ahead and make it law. Let's enact laws that do away with all of these unnecessary agencies. I don't want Kash Patel or Dan Bongino. I don't want him firing 100 ATF agents. I want him shutting the building down.
Right.
I want the door locked. I want the sign turned to closed, and I want him to throw a grenade over his shoulder as he walks away. It's done. We can't have a bureau controlling firearms in a country that has a Second Amendment protecting the right to own firearms. It's nonsensical. It should be done away with. And this is the thing, Patrick Henry, you heard in that speech. No, we're done with step by step, slowly trying to erode the king in Parliament and we're done with that. We've come to the place where it's give me liberty or give me death. And I do think, Brandon, honestly, that we're getting to that 1775 moment again. I really do think that. I'm saddened that we weren't able to keep our republic for longer than we have. But that's, we decided we preferred luxury over learning. We preferred vice over virtue. We preferred giddy over God, etc., etc. And this has all been prophesied. This has all been told to us before. We could have avoided it. We made choices. We made choices to not be educated and virtuous. And I'll say, let me just say this. I know I always go late when I'm with you because you get me fired up. But
Yeah.
I wanted to say this. One of my favorite things about Patrick Henry, he wrote this this quotation by him. He says, "Virtue, morality, and religion. This is the armor, my friend. And this alone that renders us invincible. These are the tactics we should study. If we lose these, we are conquered, fallen indeed. So long as our manners and principles remain sound, there is no danger." So virtue, morality, and religion. I mean, you can just ask yourself, how are we doing on those three? What grade do we get as a society on our virtue or morality and our religion?
So tell me in closing, the 14th Amendment. There's been a lot of talk about the 14th Amendment. Is it really that complicated, the 14th Amendment, when it comes to these illegal invaders and anchor babies?
No, it's not. It's not as complicated. I wrote an article that we're making into a pamphlet. I wrote a recent one about that. The concept. It's how people do with like the supremacy clause of Article 6. They forget the part where it says pursuant to the powers of the Constitution. They leave that part out. And in the 14th Amendment, they leave out the part that says subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. You're not a citizen just because you were born here. Even the man who introduced it, a progressive himself, who would probably not side with us on many things, but he himself said when asked about it, he's like, no, I'm not talking about just any foreigner coming over here and having a baby, and that baby is automatically American. No, I'm talking about if you have to be born of a citizen. You have to be already subject to the jurisdiction of the United States in order to be an American. It's very clear. There are so many statements, but you've got people with very large platforms who it behooves them to create the concept, to perpetuate the concept of anchor baby. I mean, we've got people like, Vivek Ramaswamy is an anchor baby. I mean, that's just the facts. His parents weren't citizens when he was born. So there are a lot of people with a lot of power and a lot of money who want to. But I'll tell you this, the Cato Institute invited me to debate one of their guys on this subject. Then my article came out and they canceled the debate.
Ooh.
And I think that was probably wise of them, because I would have seriously mopped the floor with that dude. Because the concept that you can just be born in America, no, citizenship means more than that. And you can, the one phrase, Brennan, just read it. Subject to it doesn't just say born in the United States, born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction. It's so simple. And you can go and look at the New American, look at that article that I wrote, the latest one. The latest one is, again, they've taken me off the leash and they're letting me be strident and the way you always let me talk. That's what I always tell people. I'm like, if you want to see me how I really am, you got to watch me on Brandon. And so this latest article that I wrote about birthright citizenship is the one we're turning into a pamphlet, and it is, it's full of the history that will shut the mouth of anyone who claims that, just being born here makes you a citizen. Wow. None of the founding fathers believed that. Not even the proponents of the 14th Amendment believed that. And it's now just being used as a way to facilitate the surrender of our country.
So the Uniparty, people, Democrat and Republican, are defending this because, as you say, they don't want to get down to really following the Constitution. So be very careful of the Uniparty people.
Right. Well, and also, Brandon, the thing that I think I mentioned in the article, ultimately it comes down to every one of these men that we elect, they choose, because it's not in the Constitution, but they choose to place their hand on the Bible and swear to God to uphold the Constitution. And, no sooner have they lifted that hand from the Bible than they're pushing the button to vote for something unconstitutional.
Exactly.
And so it's not just that we're electing tyrants and liars. We're electing blasphemers who are trying to make a mockery of the name of God. That should bother us a lot as Americans.
Absolutely.
And we should hold those people accountable. And when it comes to the 14th Amendment, like you said it perfectly. It's just another thing in the Constitution that they're not going to adhere to.
So, final question, are we going to make enough progress in the next 4 years to restore the Republic or not?
We are going to make enough progress in the next 4 years to protect liberty within the sovereign states. I don't. In 4 years, we'll still be who we are right now as far as a union is concerned. But I think we are heading toward a dissolution of the union, which I think is going to be ultimately a good thing, because we've got to finally decide to stop, constantly having these uniparty rule over us.
So you believe are we going to have a dissolution without a civil war or not?
Without, I think we'll have.
So without a civil war, we'll see a dissolution, and you think we'll have breakaways like what? Mississippi, Arkansas, Tennessee, what?
And it might even be, and it could even be smaller than that. It's just going to be people that can agree on basic principles.
Could Tennessee become its own independent republic?
Tennessee is right now its own independent republic. We voluntarily chose to align ourselves with a union, but voluntarily, as Madison said in 39, we voluntarily chose to enter the union so we could leave it. But we are today, as he said in Federalist 39, every state is subject to its own voluntary will as a sovereign, independent republic. Those are Madison's words in Federalist 39. So would it be the sort of thing where if you're coming in from Arkansas, you need your passport? That's what everybody that I have family in Arkansas, and I tell them all the time that I hope the next time they come visit me, they have to show their passport at the border. But I don't know how soon that'll happen. But I do know that we're on a trajectory toward greater liberty. Now, how that looks as far as some sort of entity, some sort of political organization, I don't know.
Has Doge and President Trump helped to reawaken that liberty in your mind?
Of course. Oh, of course. Yeah, not a question. I don't agree with everything they've done. That would be silly to agree with it. I put my trust not in the arm of flesh, but I can tell you that they have, in my experience with people that contact me and with the things I see, they have definitely moved the ball forward.
And
Definitely.
just even the talk of his Lupnick, his Commerce Secretary, saying President Trump's goal is to get rid of the IRS, and now he's kind of said, well, it's to have nobody that makes under 150,000 paying taxes. The revealing of all this corruption, how it's all incestual. This, Liz Cheney and Mitch McConnell and all this. I mean, the damage that these guys have done to the establishment is quite remarkable. I never thought I'd see it in my lifetime. I really didn't.
Well,
I knew it was there, and there's a lot of things we thought, but then they came out and validated how many of these judges, either their children, their spouse, or their own NGO, is all on the take.
Well, there is part of, yes, that is true, and it's so insidious. But I would ask you, if someone comes into your house and kills your family and steals your treasures, whose fault is that?
Yeah, I would be mine for letting them in.
There you go. And it's not a matter of you've got to stand at the door 24 hours a day with your gun. No, that's not the question. Question is, do you put those procedures, protocols, protections in place that would prevent those people from committing that crime at your home? Of course you do. We all do. The best we can, the most we can afford, but we haven't done that as Americans. We haven't taken care to protect this invaluable liberty that we were granted. We have, as the Bible says, how came these tares to be sown among the wheat? An enemy hath done this while we slept. We've been asleep way too long.
And we've allowed the federal government to rob the states and the individual citizens of their God-given rights. The greatest threat comes from Washington, not from beyond, which is what Andrew Jackson said. Andrew Jackson, in his farewell address, said that, did he not? The bravery of your gallant sons is known worldwide. You have no need to fear from abroad. Your fear is now from within.
I mean, it's like I said, it's not the accent of the tyrant or the color of his uniform. It's just, does he violate the principles that we hold dear? And do we hold those principles dear? Are we just looking for a comfortable slavery, or are we like Jefferson and say, no, I prefer a tempestuous peace to a calm slavery?
Joe Wolverton, the website, you can find his books where? Where can you find all your books?
Oh, Amazon. Amazon, shop, jbs.org, and thenewamerican.com for my articles, which come out, every couple of days.
Thenewamerican.com, thenewamerican.com, and then shopjbs.org, shopjbs.org. Or put Joe Wolverton into Amazon, find all of his books. Joe, as always, thanks for being with us. And again, we'll invite our audience to pray for your mom.
I'd be very grateful.
Thank you. Joe Wolverton checking in, jbs.org, shopjbs.org.